Welcome to the Misses, our relevant daily draft podcast. We're joined today with Anthony Russo, Sam Teets, special guest James Foster. It's good to see all of you. We're going to be talking about the Georgia-Tennessee game tomorrow. James, what do you, from a draft standpoint, when you're looking at this game, what do you think the biggest draft story is for you?
I guess for me, the first place my eyes would probably go would be Colton Hood against the Georgia receivers. Colton Hood, Tennessee cornerback, I think has been one of their most impressive defenders throughout the year so far. And Georgia has a lot of different guys that are talented, but kind of unproven as that main guy. So interested to see how the hierarchy shakes out in their receiver room as well.
And to kind of piggyback off that, I watched Colton Hood this week as James brought him up. And I knew we were going to do this show, and I'm totally with Colton Hood. Like, I watched his tape last year. I thought he was a lot of flashes last year, but so many inconsistencies. You put the Syracuse tape on, and it was just really dominant. You could tell he was really feeling it in that game. You get that player for the full year. I mean, we talked about this cornerback class being pretty open so far. You get that player for the full year, you could really make some noise here, like the top 40, top 50 picks, if you get a consistent player like that.
So, Anthony, how about you? Where are you on Colton Hood?
Yeah, and I was just going to answer that too. And obviously, Gunnar Stockton throwing the ball, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but doesn't give me the most confidence in the world yet. I'm still very iffy on him. So Colton Hood might take advantage of that too. I'm excited for Joshua Josephs, and I think he has the potential to feast on Georgia offensive tackles that I don't think particularly highly of. He's looked really good up to this point in the season. He's got like 7 pressures on like 35 pass rushes, I think. Everybody, of course, raves about he's got the 34 and I think it's 6/8 inch arms. It's basically 35 inches. So he's been probably Tennessee's best player, maybe other than Colton Hood or like one or the two of them. But I think Georgia's offensive line is like probably one of their weaker points of their team. So Joshua Josephs could definitely have a day for sure.
I think looking overall at this game, there's just a lot of players who, in past years, we've had Georgia teams where there's some established superstars who are already in that general first round bucket. And this year, going into this game on both sides of the ball, it feels like there's a lot of guys who it's projection based. It's like, oh, he's a superb athlete, but there's really not the level of refinement we've seen from past players on these teams. And so what I'm really looking forward to, not finally into SEC play, is to see which one of these guys are actually going to take that next step. We talked about maybe Colton Hood being that guy for Tennessee. I think that Joshua Josephs already in the Syracuse game has looked better than I thought he looked at times last season in terms of the consistency of play and the ability to generate power down to down, but especially on the Georgia side of the ball defensively. Like, are we going to get the Christian Miller here? I'm kind of curious to see what Gabe Harris Jr. can give you. I want to see if I know like CJ Allen's good, but obviously can Raylen Wilson elevate his game so they have a really star linebacker duo. I'm kind of looking, someone else in the secondary pop besides Daylen Everette. Like, I'm really looking to see if we can find some of those players just are not quite there yet, because going through the whole summer process, obviously a lot of it is projection based in terms of who has talent, who has potential. But right now I'm still thinking like we have to see it happen on the field first before we really buy into guys like Christian Miller, who has so much hype in the summer.
And I think a big thing for Tennessee too is I feel like, especially on offense, like there's good players, but I don't think there's anyone that like strikes fear in the hearts of Georgia. Like, I think Miles Kiselman is a good tight end that I was a fan of over summer scouting. Chris Brazzell has looked good at receiver for Tennessee to start the year. The offensive line has some talent, but it's also getting reshuffled because I think David Sanders is out again, the right tackle, with an injury. So that's still like a reshuffled offensive line that's now going against a Georgia front seven that's still it's Georgia. So yeah, for Tennessee, like who's gonna step up and make a play on offense? against a Kirby Smart coached defense. And you, Sam, you brought up like all these guys like Daylen Everette and CJ Allen and Christian Miller and Raylen Wilson. Like, yes, there's a lot of projection there with those guys, but I still have more confidence in that crop of talent on defense than I do generally for the players that I see on Tennessee's offense. Like, I don't really see them having a big, huge scoring day. Like I don't think they're going to be able to really put up more than like 20 points unless somebody like just really balls out and has the kind of game that like will get NFL scouts attention.
So for Tennessee offensively, I think especially when it comes to receiver, they're going to be led by a lot of underclassmen because Mike Matthews, who's a five-star sophomore, and then Braylon Staley, who had the big touchdown on the deep post against Syracuse. Those are, two of their top three probably weapons in the passing game. And so, it'll be up to them to prove it against Georgia's secondary, who's definitely the best competition they've faced so far. I would also highlight Wendell Moe, the guard, as a potential draftable prospect. He'll be going up against, hopefully get some one-on-ones against Christian Miller. I think he's a potential like early day 3 type of guy.
Yeah. So a couple questions. So James, how many players coming out of like summer scouting do you have with a day 1 or 2 grade right now in this game?
In this game, I have 2 players with a day 1 or 2 grade, but one of them is Jermon McCoy, so really just one, and that's CJ Allen. I've got early day 3s on Daylen Everette and Christian Miller, and then I think Joshua Josephs is probably a player that I'll raise his grade up to a day 2 grade now that I'm looking at it. I haven't updated since summer scouting because I'm waiting for a few weeks of sample size, but I think probably Joshua Joseph, CJ Allen, and then like Christian Miller, Daylen Everette would be the top guys I would highlight.
And Sam, how about you? Day 1 or day 2 grades?
Yeah, I'm generally in the same bucket. I think I was a little bit higher potential-wise on Raylen Wilson. I think I have him more in that like 3 to 4 bucket. Daylen Everette, I'm more maybe leaning 4th on, but otherwise, looking at basically the same players in that classification. Colton Hood is one who I'm intrigued as far as like where the ceiling could be for him. Like he's a player who could be elevated throughout the course of the year. And as James kind of alluded to, I was actually not very high on Joshua Joseph last year. I thought that his first step was inconsistent. I thought the ability to generate power was inconsistent at times for him. Well, it did flash, it just wasn't there down to down. I still think he needs to develop more counters off his initial bull rush, but I thought the level of consistent impact he showcased in Syracuse made me think that he's maybe taking that next step so far. Because he's not a very bendy player, so he's going to have to be able to win through the frame or win through the B gap more often than not. So I think he's a guy who I'm going to elevate into that, similar to James, elevate into that maybe that 3rd round kind of range at this point. But he's already like one of the guys who's kind of risen up to me. Other than that, it's a lot of like day 3 bodies in this front.
Yeah.
I know like last year I was a big Oscar Delp fan, and then he dropped like a 3rd of the passes that went his way, and that kind of stunk. But it's mainly just like mid day 3 bodies beyond like those 4 or 5 guys.
Anthony, how about you on day 1 or day 2 in this game?
Yeah, I'm pretty similar too. So CJ Allen to me was the best player that I watched. I had him very slightly over Jermon McCoy. But to me, they were like 1A and 1B in terms of like the talent that, well, we're not going to see Jermon, but the talent that we would have seen on in this game. And it certainly was a bit of a projection, but I actually was pretty high on Raylen Wilson. I had him as like a day 2 guy just because I loved the athletic traits that he brought to the table. And I just thought he just looked like a bullet sometimes flying around the field and showing that athleticism. And he really just needed to pick up the mental side of it and up his football IQ and stuff like that. But I loved what I saw from him in terms of his his traits and his build. And I thought I still think he's a perfect complement for CJ Allen, who is more of that just like, instinctive attacking kind of football player at linebacker. But yeah, I was similar to Sam on Joshua Josephs. I had a day 3 grade on him, but he'll probably rise up now unless he just gets stonewalled by Georgia, which I don't expect. I brought up Miles Kiselman before, but he was a day 3 tight end for me. Zachariah Branch was somebody I thought could be like a late day 2 kind of guy. I'm always just so hesitant on receivers that they're like 180 pounds soaking wet, and like 5'9" or 10, whatever Branch is. I think he's 5'10", but just like it's so hard for me to buy into these guys. But if he has some explosive plays against a Tennessee secondary that I actually think is pretty good, I might come around on him a little more. And also for Georgia receivers, I Noah Thomas was somebody that I was intrigued by. He had great size. He's like 6'5", 190. Obviously a little skinny when you're 6'5" and not 200 pounds. But I kind of thought he could be a little more of like a, good X receiver option for Gunnar Stockton, but he's just done really nothing this season so far. And they've played Marshall and Austin P. So yeah, I don't know if they're just kind of, keeping him in the clip or if they're trying to or they are concerned about him. I don't know, but I'm curious to see if he has any kind of, major impact in this game. But yeah, I largely agree with James and Sam. I don't think there's too many star players as of now, but there are guys that could certainly make that leap.
I will say with the Georgia passing attack, I don't know they're going to have the caliber of quarterback play to really have those kind of star receivers this year in terms of production wise. They haven't really even gotten Dillon Bell involved very much in the offense so far. And like you mentioned, Noah Thomas has not gotten a lot of run either. Branch, because you can scheme him touches and kind of can create on his own, could maybe be the leading receiver on this team, but I've never viewed him as more than like a mid-day 3 gadget player and sub-package player who can contribute on special teams. He just doesn't have the size. And frankly, for a guy who's quick and fast, he doesn't really threaten defenses that deep. He's got maybe, I think, under 10 career passes thrown to him, more than 25, 30 yards downfield. He's just not a vertical threat. And so for that kind of player with that size, he's not I think more than a day 3 player. One of the matchups that I'm actually intrigued by is the Georgia tight end room with Oscar Delp and Lawson Luckie, going against maybe Arion Carter for Tennessee, who I think at the next level is probably more like a sub package, maybe slot overhang type guy, because he is undersized, but he's got good range, he's got good overall speed. And so the matchup of those two very athletic tight ends who are not going to be blocking for you in line, they're going to be lined up more in the slot, getting those guys against someone like Arion Carter, who has that level of range and speed. That to me can maybe not be the deciding factor in the game, but I think it could certainly be the difference between whether or not you can sustain drives, because those guys Luckie is a move the chance kind of guy. They got a ton of first downs for him, almost 24 first downs with him last year. And then Delp gives you a little bit more of a big play threat in terms of creating after the catch, maybe more so than Lawson Luckie does. So that match to me is one that I would like to highlight, because you have two quality tight ends and maybe a defensive player who could be this later day 3 selection who can give you some specific role elements at the next level.
The Georgia passing game, I have an interesting stat. They have attempted, Gunnar Stockton has attempted one pass over 15 air yards that landed inbounds this year. There have been 2 that landed out of bounds, 1 inbound. So there's a chance that all of these Georgia pass catchers, we might end up not even be getting evaluations on them this year. It might be one of those teams.
Yeah, I was kind of just sitting here thinking, I wonder if, and I'm not necessarily saying they're as talented as him, but it kind of feels like Delp and Luckie might get the Colston Loveland treatment, where we know how good they can be. And again, I'm not necessarily saying they're first round tight ends, but you're basically just not going to get any legit quality tape on them just because their quarterback play is just not going to be up to par.
Well, they better hope they get a good all-star game in by then, because Colby Young, Dillon Bell, Noah Thomas, and Oscar Delp are all seniors. So you add, like, this is it for them. And frankly, again, I agree, like, you're not in a good situation quarterback-wise to have the years they're hoping for. I was a little surprised by how explosive the Tennessee passing attack was against Syracuse, but I think that's probably a combination of one, Syracuse's secondary, but also, like James mentioned, the younger underclassmen receivers who, again, I don't have evaluations on. I'm not going to quite go back to until the summer. So that's something I think could maybe surprise Georgia a little bit. But I think if Tennessee is going to win this game, to me, it's going to be more of the explosive play element of their game versus Georgia, I think, has maybe an offense more suited to ground you out, partially because they have to. Because as James just mentioned, they're not going to hit the explosives downfield in the passing attack.
Yeah, I went to Tennessee and followed them pretty closely, so I kind of know about their underclassmen. They're basically just trying. It seems like they're just trying to get as many Elijah Moores as possible. So like they just have a bunch of like small guys that are really fast and like fluid out on the field. So yeah, The passing game has looked really good, but like you said, Syracuse, I mean, they were picking on this true freshman corner who I think was like 16 or 17 for a bunch of their explosive plays. So they haven't really proven it against anyone, but at least I think Joey Aguilar's deep accuracy is an upgrade to Nico Iamaleava for sure.
Yeah, I was actually just going to highlight that. Like, I do think, the competition hasn't been particularly tough, but I do think Aguilar has actually played pretty well so far. And I do think Josh Heupel's actually using him pretty effectively, I think. We'll see now with SEC competition if that sticks, and I am still worried that all their pass catchers are inexperienced, and now you're going against, like, I do think Daylen Everette has actually shown me some good stuff early on this year. Again, not great competition, but I thought he's looked good. And Daniel Harris is somebody who I've been interested in too. I always have an affinity for massive corners. So that will be interesting too. But we'll see what happens, but I'm interested to see how Aguilar plays against this Georgia team, and if he does keep up that deep ball accuracy that you were talking about, James, like, could be maybe somebody that enters like the day 3 conversations. He's got like the look of an NFL quarterback. I think he's like 6'3", 220, something like that. So like he looks the part. If he can keep up his accuracy and do it against SEC teams, could be somebody that enters the draft talks as the season goes on.
Yeah, and I think the other interesting thing to watch, not only for this season, but just for the future going forward with Tennessee's offense, is does it start to get less brutal to watch from like an NFL draft evaluation standpoint? Because obviously, like, just by nature of like the kind of air raid system, there's going to be kind of inherent difficulties with translating to the NFL. I do think that, when Josh Heupel first came, they were pretty restricted from a scholarship standpoint, and they basically had one tight end at all times. And we've seen as they've started to replenish their roster and they're able to go into heavier personnel sets, and the splits are a lot less extreme, and it could be like just end up being a slightly more translatable offense for future NFL draft prospects. But that's something that we'll have to see down the road.
Yeah, Tennessee wide receivers always do worry me a little bit. How Jalen highlights been, but I love Cedric Tillman coming out, but it's taking him 2 or 3 years to finally get some run in Cleveland. And even when he does, the quarterback situation there is not exactly conducive to have a big year. One thing I did want to highlight,
at least Flash.
Yeah. One thing I did want to highlight was looking at like the depth of the defensive lines for these various units. I thought that Tennessee's ability to rotate in a lot of buys against Syracuse week 1 kind of impressed me. Like even guys like Tyree Weathersby had numerous big plays in that game. Nathan Robinson had the strip sack that I think led to the Colton Hood fumble recovery for a touchdown. So looking at like Tennessee's defensive line and the fact that they might be able to run out there across the course of the game like 8 different bodies against a Georgia offensive line, it's probably the weakest it's been in most recently, in the competitive Kirby Smart era. I do wonder if that will like gradually wear the Bulldogs down here, because you have NFL bodies, maybe not NFL draft picks, but guys like Bryson and Eason has some like serious power. He's able to maybe stack up the point of attack, create some negative plays that way. Dominic Bailey at least has the size to maybe be like a camp invite kind of guy. I don't know if he'll get drafted, but like those type of players, and then having some of the younger guys who are redshirt sophomores to work in, I do wonder if that could be a turning point here where Georgia usually doesn't get pushed around up front and started to kind of struggle with that a little bit last year. I wonder if we start to see the physicality of Tennessee's defensive line maybe give the Bulldogs quite a bit of trouble with the running game and push Gunner Stockton into trying to make some big plays, and that could potentially rebound negatively against them.
Yeah, and I think Jackson Moy and Daevin Hobbs are injured, and those are 2 of their starters. So their depth on the interior is a little bit tested, but I do think at Leo, which is where Joshua Josephs plays, like they've got really 3 potential NFL bodies at that position with Caleb Herring and Jordan Ross, who are both really highly recruited guys and have NFL traits. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I'm kind of thinking back to that Ole Miss game last year where the tackles just could not block Princely Manuelin's spin move. And like the spin move was kind of weak, like relative to other spin moves, I feel like, but they just had their hands full. I don't know. It's not the Georgia offensive line of old where it's like a high quality win necessarily when you're able to get a pressure against them. But yeah, I agree. That could be the turning point.
Well,
and I'm curious.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Now, because the Ernest Greene tackle, like, would not be a tackle prospect for the NFL, would be more of a guard, but like he doesn't have, to me, he's never really had the anchor ability. So I think you can get like Joshua Joseph lined up on him, just long arm him to death all game long potentially. You could really see some of the leaks in Georgia's offensive line that way, and that game popped in my mind too because you had Jared Ivey, more like the larger body guy as well in that unit. I think that Tennessee has the NBA style level of bodies along the offensive front, or on the defensive front, where you have the collection of players to find that matchup you want over the course of the game and just pick it apart. So I think that's really where I'm zeroing in on potentially the game-changing side of the ball. Usually it's Georgia's defensive line versus the other team's offensive line, but I think it's flipped in this case.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I was just going to say I'm interested to see too. You know, we haven't really talked about Tennessee's linebackers. I think Arion Carter has played pretty well this season. But again, you know, Georgia is not like a team that he's played before. So I'm curious to see if he is any kind of pass rush threat on blitzes. I think Edwin Spillman's also kind of played pretty well this year too. So I'm curious to see if they try to create pressure with those guys, or if they use them more to just kind of focus on Delp or Luckie or whoever. But yeah, Georgia's offensive line feels, relative to most years, I feel like we talk about them, like it's not great. Like it's just like I personally like Micah Morris. I think he's a good guard that can get some day 3 love. You know, and Juan Gaston is just like a freak of nature, true freshman. That's probably going to be somebody we're going to be talking about, you know, in a couple of years. But yeah, like I talked about like the tackles I'm not particularly high on. And Gunner Stockton is going to need all the help he can get. So if Tennessee chooses to just like attack him and blitz him and test him, and he doesn't, you know, recognize and he doesn't handle it well, it could be a long day for Bulldog fans.
James, let me ask you this. When Jermon McCoy comes back, who sits down in this cornerback room?
I think it would probably, I mean, it's tough because the top 4 would be Jermon McCoy, Colton Hood, Boo Carter, and Ricky Gibson. Normally they've got Ricky Gibson as the other boundary corner opposite of Jermon McCoy, but they're both injured right now. I think the most realistic scenario is that Colton Hood plays well and ends up taking Ricky Gibson's job, and then he probably like transfers somewhere, even though he's a really good player. And then Boo Carter, who is a big, like, they've got a bunch of NIL tied up in him, so he's going to be their star nickel type of guy. So yeah, that would be my guess.
So no, Gibson's popped a little bit every now and then the past couple of years. He always seems to make a couple of big plays in matchups, but
yeah, he's pretty solid.
Yeah, so I was just wondering because I know he popped me a little bit last year, so I was just curious who among this star cornerback room was going to have some issues.
It's not a problem that they've ever had in my lifetime. Is too many good corners.
You can never have too many good corners. It doesn't matter. I don't think it matters what level of college football or pro football.
No.
I think cornerback depth gets tested, right? Because if one, like that's a position where you're on an island, so you get tested. So,
and one injury slides everybody down like a matchup, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I have a question. James, over under 15 and a half players in this game get drafted in 2026.
Let's see.
And I counted on the player list as you guys were talking about players. So this is meant to be a
counting in real
difficult question.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll say 15 get drafted.
Sam, how about you?
I'm probably going to take the under by a little bit. You know, I'll probably top out around 13 looking through list or so. You know, I think there's some guys where I could go either way, really. So I'm just going to lean the under for now.
And how about you, Anthony?
Yeah, I think I'm an under too. I mean, there's a couple underclassmen that I guess could skew it, but yeah, I'm looking at it. I would pretty confidently take the under. I don't think either of these teams are like as loaded as we would normally expect. Like especially Georgia. Like I feel like we're so used to Georgia being like the new age Nick Saban Alabama teams, and this roster, like it's good, but I don't think it's great. So yeah, I would take the under on that.
Yeah, the guys who have extra eligibility is what tipped it for me. I feel like there were just enough guys. There's more guys to me who would probably go back to school for another year and try to really get a bump than settle for being like a mid-day 3 or being a 5th round kind of guy.
And I have a question about the highest player on the board. So based upon what I've heard coming out of summer scouting, Jermon McCoy feels like the top player in the game. He's obviously hurt, not playing, right? Who's the next highest, James, for you in this?
Next highest would definitely be CJ Allen. Just want to see a little bit more consistency from him in coverage this year, but overall he was pretty comfortably my LB1. And I've got him graded about 2 rounds higher than anybody else in this game.
Okay. And Sam, how about you?
Yeah, CJ Allen was also my linebacker 1. So I would lean towards him being the next best player in this game. And unfortunately, I don't think like Christian Miller's player again. I think I have a little bit higher rank than James, but it's all just flashes now. You don't really have the substance you want for him to be in that conversation.
And how about you, Anthony?
Yeah, it's CJ Allen for me. I think he's pretty clearly the best player that'll be on the field. I talked about it before, but like I do think Raylen Wilson is very talented. He kind of just needs a little more consistency and development and refinement in his game, but I think all the tools are there. And Christian Miller is definitely somebody that could I think take the leap too. I'm probably closer to Sam than James on him, but in terms of like ready to go NFL talent, it's CJ Allen.
Yeah, there's a tier break for me between where CJ Allen is and where you would consider Christian Miller.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question. Raylen Wilson and Lawson Luckie. Do you think they're 2026 or do you think they're 2027, James?
Okay, so those are two players that I actually haven't watched in this game, so I'm going to have to defer to you guys.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say that Luckie to me is going to be a 2027 guy. Delp's gotten more runs so far through two games. I think, frankly, Luckie's more of a he's athletic. He's more of a move the sticks kind of guy. Like he's more of a guy who's going to sit down the chains for you. Versus Delp, I think has more vertical presence to him. Can do a little bit more for you after the catch. So Luckie to me, I just don't think he's going to have the production as well as the well-rounded profile to justify going out this year when you just go back for another year, get more NIL, and hopefully be your the clear tight end one on the offense next year. Who was the other player you asked for, Jim? Raylen Wilson?
Yes.
Yeah, I would probably also think that next year is where I'm leaning, which is why I would go the under for 15 guys taken in this game, because I just think that he's probably going to go back for one more year. He's just a little bit further behind than some of the other linebackers we talked about towards the top of this draft class. I feel like he's just talented, but not nearly at the level of a guy who I'd want to be starting in 2026 for my team. And if that's the case, I think you just go back to school for another year.
How about you, Anthony?
Yeah, I agree with Sam. I think they're both 2027 guys. If I had to pick one that I would say would come out this year, it's probably Raylen Wilson, only because I could see the path. Like if he plays really well and like I said, like if he shows more development and refinement on those athletic traits that I think he already shows in flashes, like I could see him, and he gets like top 50 grades from scouts. Like I could see him making that jump. Whereas with Luckie, like I think he's a good player, but he's just not, we just saw Oscar Delp come back for his senior year. Like Georgia tight ends declaring just doesn't feel like something with the way that the passing offense is constructed right now is something that Lawson would want to do. He's very likely going to want to get the run as tight end one next season with whoever the quarterback is at that point. But so I think if one comes out, it's probably Raylen. But if I had to bet on it, both probably just stay back and hope for solid senior seasons.
Okay. Another question as far as, let's say, draft stock. Let's say, a more exciting one-on-one matchup? A Georgia wide receiver going against Colton Hood, or Joshua Josephs going against an offensive lineman like Ernest Greene? So, James, if you had to pick, like, which of those two matchups do you think defines somebody's draft stock better?
Yeah, I think I'm probably most interested to watch the Colton Hood versus Georgia receivers, just because Ernest Greene has never really impressed me as an NFL draft prospect. I feel like he's kind of been on my radar for a few years now, and I've never really had anything more than a 7th round grade on him. So I don't really even view that as particularly great competition for Joshua Josephs.
Sam, how about you?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Ernest Greene's also had like some significant medical stuff pop up that would probably preclude him from being drafted anyways. So I would lean towards, Colton Hood versus basically anyone in that wide receiver room at this point. The Georgia offensive line this year just doesn't really intrigue me that much.
Anthony, are we going to be unanimous?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunately for Georgia fans, it's the same reason that James gave, is I don't see either of their tackles as like, anything more than like maybe late day 3 guys. And that's probably being even generous. But as long as if Joshua Josephs goes out there and just like dominates, even if it is not great Georgia offensive lineman, it's still Georgia. So like maybe then it'll be like, okay, we have to talk about him as a top end NFL draft talent. But the Colton Hood matchup versus whichever Georgia receiver it winds up being, I'm kind of hoping it's going to be like more Zachariah Branch. I'd be interested to see how he handles a receiver like that is a little quicker, and maybe has tried to scheme to get open a bit. But realistically, he's probably just going to be on one side of the field, and whoever's there is there. But it'll be, but yeah, I'm interested to see if Colton Hood can sort of keep up this momentum. Because the other thing too is, if I'm not mistaken, he's only a redshirt sophomore, right? So like, he could easily not come out either. Like he could just decide, I'll stick around for one more year if Jermod McCoy comes back this year, which I don't know how likely that is, but if he comes back and gets all the rub as CB1 for Tennessee, maybe he decides to stick around one more year. But yeah, I'm more intrigued by what the Georgia pass catchers are even able to do against Tennessee.
We're probably not getting that Hood Branch matchup. Branch is going to be in the slot basically the entire game. They got some bigger bodies to work on the outside, but no, I think that's still, there's enough traits there in that wide receiver from Georgia that I'd be interested to see how that matchup goes.
So is there anything else in this matchup that anybody wants to talk about, or do you want to pivot to maybe just talk about some of the other college games that are going to be kicking off tomorrow? Anything else in Tennessee, Georgia that somebody hasn't had a chance to talk about yet?
I think we hit on all my talking points.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we covered most of it for me.
Silence is a dangerous form of concurrence, but that's what I heard. So, James, anything standing out maybe in Oregon, Northwestern, or I'm looking at some of the other matchups towards the top.
Well, we don't have to go too much further than Oregon, Northwestern if we want to start there, because that's I was just talking to my co-host Corey Kinnan for a Daft on Draft and about this week's matchups, and I said the first tape that I'm going to on Sunday, Monday, whenever, is going to be Oregon Northwestern to see Anto Saka against Isaiah World. Hopefully we get some one-on-ones there. But yeah, first like true NFL competition for both of those guys. Also very impressed by Dante Moore so far. And if he verifies what he's shown against the better competition that they have coming up, I think that it's fair to start talking about him as QB1.
Okay. Sam, you want to take that and expand?
No, I think you hit on everything I'm looking for in that game. I'm a big Anto Saka fan, so I'm very excited for that. But yeah, like this quarterback class to me, it's wide open really. Like you can put a de facto crown on Garrett Nussmeier or anyone you want to, but I think like someone can still go in there and easily snatch that. So Dante Moore is a guy who I'm hoping will do that. And I'm hoping just someone will do it. Elsewhere in the early window, Keelan Rutledge at Georgia versus Clemson will be interesting because Rutledge plays a little bit high. He's a little bit stiff. Like I have more of like a third round mark on him, or maybe like an early third at this point. But like putting him against someone who's as agile and shifty as Peter Woods, and then someone as strong as DeMonte Capehart will be a good overall test for how he's able to adjust the different skill levels. So that's something I'm interested in watching in that guard level. Also watching to see if Clemson, my alma mater, can actually win a game convincingly. That'd be very interesting at this point in time to see if they can just put together a competent offense. But I think that's an interesting game I want to keep an eye on, mostly for the defensive line versus the offensive line matchup.
Anthony, anything to add?
Yeah, I literally just was looking at the slate as we've been sitting here. I mean, Texas A&M, Notre Dame stands out. If, are we going to keep seeing Cassius Howell just like literally take over, not even games, just take over drives, against a Notre Dame offensive line that kind of got semi-embarrassed by Miami in week one. Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor kind of just had their way with them, particularly in the fourth quarter. So I'm interested to see if Notre Dame will sort of like respond and step up to the occasion, or if, again, like Cassius Howell just takes over again. I've been very pleasantly impressed by Howell so far. Against Utah State, it's not like crazy, but still just what he's been able to show in terms of, I alluded to like that drive of 3 sacks in a row, but like what made it so great was just the way that he won every single time was different. And that translates to the NFL regardless of who you're playing against. So if he does something, he doesn't have to have 3 sacks in a drive, but if he's able to showcase like he can win in different ways against a Notre Dame offensive line, now like I think the first round foundation is really going to be set for him.
That Notre Dame offensive line might not be that good, by the way. They've got young players in that line, and frankly, it was pretty ugly against Miami. Miami has some good rushes, but when Akeem Mesdor is beating you really like a drum, you have to start worrying about those offensive tackles a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. So there was a game. I haven't heard too much talk of the draftable players in South Florida, but South Florida against Miami is 2 ranked teams. Anybody on South Florida that could really improve their draft stock against a top 10 team in the country?
I'm not gonna be able to give you a name. Besides, not for 2026. No, I'm not giving you one.
Byron Brown is probably the low hanging fruit. That's I don't know where we all stand on Byron Brown, but like people have literally been intrigued by his physical tools for what years now. So like if he goes out and balls out against Miami, then I guess. But like even in the Florida win, they won the game, which is what matters. But like he didn't really even play that great. He still didn't really throw consistently accurately. I think he had like a 64% completion percentage or something like that. So like he still just feels like a developmental player, even though he's felt like a developmental player for 3 seasons. And I know he's had the medical stuff too, but like people want Byron Brown to happen, and I don't think it's ever going to happen. But in a world where he goes out and throws for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns against Miami, then I guess it will happen.
It's a good college team. It's not something I'm looking for draft prospects. It's on the CW, by the way, which is a total bummer because you just don't want to put the CW on my TV, frankly.
Okay. Well, why don't we pause? Let's let everybody know who we are, and then we can close this out. So, James, I think it's maybe your 3rd or 4th time here podcasting with Draft Professor. So, thank you for coming back. You want to let everybody know about Daft on Draft and all the other draft content that you make?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at NoFlagsFilm, and then host a draft podcast with Corey Kinnan called Daft on Draft. You can find that on YouTube as well.
Sam?
Yeah, you can find me at Sam_Teets33 on Twitter. And if you go to Substack, you can find my Substack Sports Talk with Sam Teets, where I'm putting out a couple of draft profiles a week at this point in time. We get weekly updates as far as who are the top players from the past weekend, various content like that, almost always focused on college football and the draft at this point.
Anthony?
Yep. You can find me on X at Anthony_Russo97. I've also got a Substack you can check out as well. And I'll be on Draft Professor podcasts every Friday night and Saturday early evenings. We'll be recapping all the college games up to that point and previewing what's to come later in the night. So yeah.
So I want to thank everybody for stopping by on a Friday night. So welcome to Draft Professor. We're here every day at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern, so 2 podcasts every night. We can't do that without people like Anthony, Sam, and James just showing up once. There's a network of 94 podcasters at the Draft Professor, as well as several guests that come on that help us create the content every day. So I believe the Georgia Tech game is the game that we're previewing at 9. So I believe that's Georgia Tech Clemson specifically. So feel free to, go eat dinner and then come back at 9 and you can hear people talking about the draft eligible players in those games. So from that standpoint, we definitely appreciate everybody stopping by. For the 94 podcasters of the Draft Professor, for James, Sam, Anthony, give all 3 of those gentlemen a follow. We can't do this without them. Thank you so much for stopping by, everybody, and enjoy your weekend. And we will see you on a podcast again in about an hour. Thank you.